Hello, and thank you for joining us again. This is Sunlight Radio Online, and this is Akwesi Opong. We are talking about setting boundaries in your relationship, and we have had an extensive discussion as to how boundaries are designed to keep our relationships safe. The goal of boundaries is not to keep anybody out or prevent us from having fun, but it's to make sure that we maximize our fun and our excitement and our joy in our relationship. So as we move down the line, we are talking about areas in which we can make sure that we are setting boundaries. And the next thing I'd like to talk about is setting boundaries with your children. You know, as a married couple, you have to set boundaries with your children. Because as you all know, we've all been children before, but not all of us have been adults before. But the truth is, children have the ability to really take every time you have. You know, it's important that we train and bring up our children to be dependent and to be independent, because as you know, the Bible says that we should train them, because one day they will leave and cleave. And our children, you know, our marriage has to survive our children, in the sense that our children have to leave. We don't have to leave. You know, when a husband or wife leaves before their children, something is wrong. You know, we have to make sure, and when I say leave, I mean breaking up the marriage and leaving. You know, our children grow up with us and leave, but it's important that we set those boundaries, especially when they are little. Children have the ability to take every time that you have. Once they start growing up, let them help you. I'm a big fan of that. Let them help you with chores. You know, when they want to do things around the house, assign responsibilities to them. Let them do things, and that time that you get back whilst they're doing these chores, invest that in yourself and also in your marriage. It's so important that we set boundaries. One area that I also want to emphasize where we need to set boundaries as a husband and wife is your bedroom. You know, as children, as you all know, with very little children, you know, when they cry at night, they come to your room to sleep in your bed, and especially sometimes we even have their crib in our room. But when it's age appropriate, you have to make sure that the children have their own room. You know, they learn to be able to sleep by themselves, so that as a couple you can have your sanctuary, you can have your space. That is one big boundary that as a married couple you have to talk about it. You have to decide what works, because most too often one wants the children to come to the room and the other doesn't. Without saying it, I think we all know who wants the children to come and who doesn't. You know, it has to be your sanctuary. Your bedroom is your sanctuary. It's a place of relaxation, connection, and intimacy. And you have to not only put boundaries around your bedroom, but you also have to let your children respect your bedroom. And keeping your bedroom clean is also another thing. Making sure there's a place that when you go, it calms you down. Make sure that you make your bed every morning. I'm not even going to go into that. But anyway, make sure that your children, you set boundaries that help you to nurture your relationship. There are various seasons. There are times when your children are young. Yes, it's appropriate to spend a lot of time with them. It's important. But as they grow up, make sure that they are not taking every minute of your time and denying your relationship the time it needs to develop. So setting boundaries is very, very, very important. So thank you all again for being with us. And again, we do have our phone lines open. If you want to contribute to our show today, the number to reach us is 240-772-1420. And I also like all of you to know that we do archive this show on our website, which is www.enjoylifewithyourspouse.com. We have various resources there. You can go and make sure that you use them. And I also have to say that we came out with a book this year during Valentine's. So if you didn't have the chance to get one, it's a great resource on building friendship in your marriage. And there are some activities in there that can help you to really deepen your friendship in your marriage. We all married our best friend, and it's somewhere along the line we dropped the ball. So let's go back to getting the tools and the resources we need to develop that friendship within our marriage. So thank you again, and let's move right along. So we are at that point. How do you set boundaries? I'm sure a lot of you have been asking the question. This is the hard part, because this is when you have to tell some people, no, I can't do it. I'm sorry, but I need to go home to my family. You have to tell people, you know what, I can't do this. Maybe another time. My family or my wife is important, or I need to take care of this at work. Saying no and setting those boundaries has been a very difficult thing for a lot of us. And it's important that we say no, or we will hear no another place we don't want. So setting your boundaries means you have to sit down and ask yourself what you want to feel or experience in your marriage. So understanding that, what is the picture you have in your mind when you got married? How did you imagine or envision it to be? Keep that picture, and with that, set boundaries that can let that picture of your marriage come to fruition. Work on the aspects which apply to you, and let your husband or your wife know what those boundaries are. So if you have boundaries that says that, as a husband and wife, it's important that we spend time together every week where we put away all devices, and I want us to sit down. That if that is your wife's boundary, your wife has to communicate that to you, and you have to make sure you clearly understand it. Clarity is key, no ambiguity. Make sure you understand clearly what those boundaries are, so that when the time comes, you know that this is a line my wife said is important with her, and I'm not going to cross it. So communicate that and make sure that it's very, very clear. Now, some of the ways, the resources that we gathered on how to set boundaries came from Psychology Today. It's an online resource that has family life resources, and it goes through various things and things that can really help us to set these boundaries. So earlier on, we talked about intellectual boundaries as one of those things. Now, setting intellectual boundaries is around your marriage is thinking of ways, the ways that you think through things, your intellect, your thinking, your mind, not creating stories that don't exist. When you see your husband is quiet, you start building all these stories about why he might be quiet, and the boundary you set there is to say that, my husband is quiet, let me go and find out why, and not create all these stories and, get into this whole emotional state of creating stories and becoming upset yourself. Another area is emotional. We talked about setting emotional intelligence being part of the process of having good boundaries. Being in control of your emotions is a key part of this. How well do you control your emotions as an individual? When something happens, a conflict is brewing, how quickly are you able to say, I have a boundary, I'm not going to make sure that I won't cross it. I'm going to make sure that I won't say anything or do anything and let this conflict escalate. So you take steps, to make sure these boundaries are in place, and you make sure you don't cross it. The physical, we talked already about that. Social boundaries, where to go, what not to go, some invitations to places won't add to your values and also to your relationship. It's always good to say no to them. Your spirituality, we talked about this earlier, that when it comes to your faith, are we crossing lines we're not supposed to? Are we compromising in ways that we're not supposed to? Do we fully understand the love that God has for us? It goes in that way too, that sometimes the issue is not to say we don't love God anymore, but also the issue is we fail to recognize how much He loves us, and we have to always be aware of that. Yes. So know your limits. Knowing your limits is very important. Clearly define your intellectual, emotional, physical, and spiritual boundaries, what they are with strangers, your colleagues, your friends, and most especially your spouse. Clearly define them. We spoke about that earlier. You have to set those boundaries, and you have to communicate those boundaries to the stakeholders and the people that you relate with, who are really going to be the ones that will benefit from these boundaries that you're putting in place. Be assertive. When I say be assertive, we have to learn to create, boundaries that is helpful, but also we have to follow through the boundaries that we set, and that's what counts. The only way to truly alert others that your boundaries have been crossed is to be direct with them. So when a boundary is being crossed, you have to say it directly, not rudely. As you heard me say, I didn't say rudely, I said directly. We have to say directly that, oh, I'm sorry, but this is one of the boundaries that I said that I cannot do this. So I'm sorry, I can't do this, or I cannot come to your house at this time because I have to spend time with my children. You have to be very direct. You don't go around it and try to be politically correct or try to hide the truth, behind words. But let's be very direct when it comes to communicating where we stand with what is very important to us. So practice. We have to practice the way we communicate. I like to practice things before I do them, and it's really important that you can stand in front of a mirror and practice how to say no to somebody when they ask you to do something that you're not able to do. Practice it. Say it in the mirror. Look at yourself. Say it. You can take a walk in the woods and say it in the air or to the trees. After a while, you become very comfortable with the process, and it becomes very easy for you to say no when you have to say no, because sometimes your happiness and your joy depends on you saying no. It will really help you to bring your relationship where it has to be. So practice is very important. It's going to bring us to that point of we being able to grasp the details and what is true and what we need to know about our relationship. Again, my name is Akwesi Opong. This is Sunlight Radio Online. We are talking today about setting boundaries in your relationship, and there's so much resource that we're going through, and I hope you're picking so much from this as we go along. And at this point, we are going to take a quick break, and before we go, I'd like you to know we are archiving all these resources on our website, which is www.enjoylifewithyourspouse.com. We also like to invite you to participate in some of the other shows we have on Sunlight Radio Online. It's a great radio station where we have all kinds of resources and entertainment as well. So if you'd like to contribute to our show tonight, the number is 240-772-1420. Thank you so much, and we'll be right back. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Akwesi Opong. This is Sunlight Radio Online. We are talking today about setting healthy boundaries in your marriage. And the analogy I gave earlier is one that I like so much, really helps me to put this in perspective. And the illustration I gave was, think of it as driving on a highway and having those guardrails on the side of the road that helps you, keeps you safe. And the idea of having boundaries in your relationship is not to restrict you, is not to take away your joy, is not to put you in any kind of bondage, but the idea is to protect you, keep you, your spouse, and your marriage, and also your family safe. So it's important that we establish and know what these boundaries are. First of all, we have to define them, and after they are defined, we have to communicate those boundaries to our spouse and all the people who will benefit or will participate in setting those boundaries with us, and then we have to enforce it. And one of the hard truths is that there's no other way about it than be very direct. If somebody is encroaching on a boundary you set in some aspects of your relationship, we have to be very clear. We have to be upfront and say, this is a line I'm not willing to cross, because I know that when I cross this line, I'm going to be on the other side. I will regret, I'll be disappointed, I'll be hurt. It's going to bring some form of pain or disappointment. So we have to make sure we set these boundaries. And we also said that sometimes we might not be able to live up to the expectation. We might, break a boundary. And when that happens, we have to reevaluate what went wrong, what we're not able to live up to make sure that next time when the issue comes up or the situation comes up, we'll be able to really live up to that expectation. So we are going to keep moving on. There are a few other things that I want us to look at as we consider this. We've touched on some of them, but it's important to rehash a few of them. We talked earlier about communication. Communication is always the way that all this whole issue of setting boundaries coming together. Now, when it's time to communicate about your boundaries, clarity is very important. Setting time to make that happen is important. A few weeks ago, we had one of our shows. The title was "The State of Your Union." If you can go back and review that, it was somewhere the last week of January. We had a show called "The State of Your Union," and if you can go back and listen to it, that is time that you set apart to really talk about your marriage and discuss issues that are affecting your marriage or how you want your marriage to be better. And that is an opportunity where you can use to really get into the details of setting boundaries you want to set for your relationship. Certain things that you want to do to make sure that it's keeping your marriage safe, it's protecting the institution of your marriage and making sure that you are fully enjoying your marriage. We have to spend time to identify what is important to us in our relationship and also in our lives. And I think we made that point very, very clear. What is important to you? What do you want to see as a result of this? We have to at some point ask ourselves the question, that age-old question: what are we here for? What are you in this marriage for? What is the whole purpose of getting married? If we don't have goals or boundaries, or we haven't set any rules that will help us to keep the marriage healthy. So let's put these in place to ensure that we are on track and it's leading us to where we need to be. We also have to we can also take this another level by setting consequence. So you can set a consequence that says that if I break this barrier or this boundary, this is what happens, and that we're holding ourselves accountable. This is like, all the way up holding ourselves to a very high extent of self-discipline. If you break that boundary, or you don't live up to that boundary, what happens? What happens to you? What can your spouse do to you? This is not to say that your spouse could do anything that is hurtful, but I guess that will some questions can be asked, or your spouse could reprimand you and say, you set this boundary, you said you were going to keep it, and you did not. That's another area we can be very direct, because as we have said, the purpose of setting boundaries is to keep us safe. Keep you safe, keep your spouse safe, your family safe, and also your marriage safe. So making sure that you have that in mind really, really helps. As we move along, we have to take responsibility. If you decide to set those boundaries, the responsibility is yours to say, I'm going to be responsible for what I say I'm going to do, and we have to be men and women of our word to make sure that whatever we say we're going to do, whatever boundaries we put in place, we are going to make sure we keep those boundaries. And if we need help with it, there's no shame in getting help. I've said quite often that the very successful people in this world are people who get help, who seek counsel, or who speak to specialists. The very wealthy people, they're wealthy because they have financial advisors, they have coaches who teach them and walk them through the things they have to do, because they've been there. So why do you invent the wheel if somebody already invented the wheel? You can buy the wheel from them, or you can borrow the wheel from them. So in the same way, if you know somebody who, or even a professional who is good at helping people establish boundaries and help to keep them accountable to those boundaries, it's important to spend some time to speak to this person who can really help you together as well. Let's be aware that the goal of this is to really help ourselves and also our spouses in our relationship, So, as we go through talking about this, what are other ways that relationship changes when we set boundaries? It does something positive to our relationship. Why would we be talking about it if it doesn't? If we spend time investing in setting these boundaries and implementing them, talking about them, making sure that we are accountable, it does something for our relationship. And what it does is that, number one, it improves mutual respect for our relationship. So not only respect from your spouse, but also respect for your children or the people around you. And the way you gain respect is that you said that you're setting a boundary and you live up to it and you did it. And as a result of that, you gain respect. You respect yourself because you've been able to set goals and achieve them. And as a result, all the people around you will also respect you as well. Yeah. So, it also prompts a discussion or debate, but ultimately improves your relationship. So being able to set boundaries and keeping them improves your relationship. You realize that you'll be able to communicate better, you'll be able to enjoy each other's presence, you'll be able to do fun things that you've always wanted to do because you've invested in setting up those boundaries that are helping with your relationship. It also reduces disagreements and conflicts in relationship, because one way conflict starts, as we had said earlier, is when as a husband or wife, we do things that are without control, things that could be even wild. We are out of control, no boundaries, we're just doing things the way we want, we say yes to anybody, we don't have any accountability in our lives. It brings conflict. So the absence of that will ensure that there's less conflict, there's very little or no argument. I've said time and over that there's nothing like a conflict-free marriage. As long as we're human beings, there's conflict. And scientists tell us that about 20% of the time there will be some form of conflict. But the important thing is knowing how to deal with the conflict when it comes. Yes. So, another thing that setting boundaries does for us is that it reduces hurt feelings and sadness. I think that this ties into the other point I made about reducing conflicts as well. You know, when we invest in setting boundaries, it helps us, it keeps us happy in our relationships, and it improves our connections as well. You know, it also reduces guilt, hurtful feeling, and helps us to really use the time we have productively. You know, when we invest in building boundaries, it also helps us to develop deep intimacy. You know, intimacy is enriched because we're not focusing on things that make our relationship unsafe. And when you feel safe in your relationship, it brings more connection, it brings more intimacy, and we're able to enjoy each other on an intimate level as well. You know, it also leads to situations of great communication. That's another one, because communication is the vehicle that helps us to arrive at setting good boundaries. So if we're able to do that, it opens us doors for us to be able to communicate with each other well. It helps us to relate with our spouses well. It helps us to develop the good talking skills, and our ability to handle issues when they come up is also very important. So as we have gone through all of this, I want you to take some time over this week to think of what boundaries you can set for your relationship. Ask yourself the question that, are there areas in my relationship or even in my life as an individual, as a husband or wife, are there places where you need to set some boundaries? You know, are there certain things you have to put in place to make sure certain things don't get out of control? Are you spending too much time at work? Are you saying yes to everyone? You know, are you doing things that doesn't contribute to the health and the happiness of your relationship? When we set these boundaries, it's really going to help us and bring us to that point of really and truly enjoying life with your spouse. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, my name is Akwesi Opong, and we hope that you will join us again here next Thursday at 8 p.m. And between now and then, make sure that you are working in setting boundaries in your relationship that will help you grow and develop. Thank you, and have a wonderful week.